why are we here?
I just wanted to create something that for trending content. So we produce a lot of content that's a little bit repetitive, that has a certain audience for it, but I wanted to get something out of the news and comment on it right away within 15 minutes of people starting their day, and I want to do it live. So this was recorded, but I wanted to do it live.
Okay. Get you to 50 followers, and then we'll get you live.
Yeah, I couldn't do it because I had 0 followers, and I needed a 50 to do a live
So
stream.
please subscribe.
That literally means that even my parents are not a subscriber to me.
We'll get you.
And that means that I'm not a subscriber to me because I have my
That
own
means
personal
Lipko's actually not a subscriber to you.
Yeah.
That's
so
bad.
we'll fix that though, but the intention is to do live.
Okay, and then you had 2 things you want to talk about in relation to, I guess you want to talk about what's going to happen when Trump becomes president in relation to business.
Well, what I do is I look at social media,
Okay.
and a lot of people are asking questions about sort of business or business and politics, and a lot of times about details. And I think people make it out to be a lot more complicated than it is. It has to actually be very practical. And so I wanted to give my input, what I had experienced or am experiencing about some of these things that are current events that are happening. And one of them was the tariffs. And probably the question that I saw a lot on videos was, who pays the tariff? Probably the number one. And it's actually kind of a complicated question. About who pays for anything is complicated. But who actually writes the check to the government, because the tariffs are collected by the government. I think it's in Canada, one of only 2 departments that actually have a positive, like an influx of cash.
Okay.
All the other departments just spend money.
In their deficit.
Yes, exactly. I think the IRS and the CRA in Canada, and then I think it's there's a Bureau of Trade or whatever in the U.S. and the same one in Canada. They're the only ones who actually produce some money.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe WSIB.
Okay.
I don't know.
Anyways, I know a ton of people work there, but okay, take me back to tariffs though, and kind of explain it to me. So, like, okay, Trump is maybe imposing this 20%, 5% tariff. What does that mean? Like, just even as like a U.S. citizen, what does that mean?
Well, so the person who actually pays for it would be a broker. So the broker would cut the check to the government.
Okay, but even before that. So I'm a U.S. citizen, I'm buying Canadian goods, European goods, I'm paying 25% more? Is that how it works?
Not necessarily.
Okay, so take me back.
That's the more complicated one.
Oh,
okay. So
okay.
the one who actually gives the money to the government is the broker.
Okay.
And the broker is contracted. There's an agreement with usually a domestic company. So that means that if in the U.S. case, it'd be a U.S. company, and the reason for that is because they're going to owe money to the broker, and they don't want a foreign company owing money to them. Correct. So they say we need an agreement with the domestic company. So if you don't pay your bill, we could sue you.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Now so they actually write the check to it, and they collect the money from whoever said they're going to import this.
Okay.
Whoever said that they were going to have this agreement, which is normally the domestic company, which means it's typically the buyer of the stuff.
So it's kind of like remitting in Canada, remitting like an HST. Like if you collect HST, remit HST.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times they won't even release your goods until you pay.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, they'll hold your goods, and if you're waiting for stuff, they'll start incurring more costs, usually on a daily. So it's usually there's like a 2-day period, and then after that you start incurring quite a bit of cost, and they'll just keep racking up a bill, and th'll just send you the bill until you got to pay.
Well, if you want your goods, you got to pay for it.
Bingo.
So now, they're playing their game.
Yeah, it's quite a robust system. Now the thing is now who actually pays for it though is like who has the burden of it, who has the cost of it, who is negatively affected by it, and that's a complicated one. If it was let's say it was a luxury handbag, and they had some luxury good on the cost of it, it probably would be a very small amount comparative to the sell price of it to you. Mm-hmm. And they were not going to raise the price. But let's say it's on something that's a bit of a commodity, meaning that there's many people selling the same thing. They're all going to raise the price by the same amount, which means that the consumer now is going to pay a greater percentage of that.
So the consumer's the one that's getting negatively affected by this.
It's ultimately, it depends on what you're selling.
Okay.
And this is like an economics question.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it can get a little complicated.
Yeah.
It's actually called the price elasticity of demand.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Not very well, but I remember hearing about it.
A lot of people don't know that Erin actually has her MBA.
Yes.
Yeah. They think that she's just a personality in the hydraulic shop, but no, she actually has her MBA. So it depends. So I'll give you an example here is, let's say you buy something for $90 and you sell something for $100,
Okay.
and they impose a tax on it. And I'm just going to say it's a $5 tax. So now they have to raise the price from $100 to $105, because let's just say they can't make less than $10 per one.
Yeah.
But if they raise the price to $105, nobody buys it. Okay? So it's because maybe there's an alternative that was $101.
Yeah, or it's just too much.
It's just too much. 105, people just say, I don't want it for
I don't need
105. They don't need it at 105. They only need it at 100.
Okay.
That means that the person that was selling it, though, is going to sell 0 of them.
Yeah.
So now who is it that's negatively affected by it?
Well, in that case, the person with all the goods.
That's right. So it really depends on what the good is. That's who is negatively affected by the tariff. And you hope that the people in Washington, that they put it on certain ones that are going to affect the right person. You hope that they're going to...
So it's not like an across-the-board thing. It's going to vary per industry or per good or per class of goods?
Yeah, it is. It's a HS harmonized...
Okay.
HS code, but harmonized, but they just call them a tariff code or HS code.
Okay.
It's a 10-digit number, and normally they have like a 4-digit and then a period, 4 period, and then 2.
Okay.
And you have to put that and the country of origin. So those two things determine what tariff they're going to charge you, and it could be a huge difference if you get it wrong. It could be
sure.
It could be massive. There's some that have 0 and there's some that have
100.
lots. Yeah, not 100%. There's nothing that's like 100%, but there are ones that are quite high already, like 25.
What type of goods get higher tariffs?
Anything. So the purpose of a tariff is usually to protect an industry.
Okay.
So let's say there's a country, and it, instead of properly disposing its waste, it just dumps it into rivers. A country that doesn't just dump its waste in the rivers would say, well, that gives you an unfair advantage. And I can't remain competitive because I simply can't dump into the rivers.
I got to pay to get rid of it. Or...
Yeah, exactly. It costs me a lot of money. So they're being unfair. They have an unfair advantage.
And are they illegally dumping, or like the country lets them dump?
What's the difference?
Okay.
It doesn't even matter.
Okay.
Yeah, there are times where often you'll see it. I think like the softwood lumber is a popular one. Is it where the government's supposed to be? They say the government's supposed to be charging for some service, for the land, for instance.
Yeah.
And they're not charging that. So they say, well, you have an unfair advantage because you're not being charged that. But very political.
For sure.
Definitely on the softwood. I don't really deal a lot with wood, so I just only know what I read in the news. But a lot of the goods that I deal with a common one are bearings.
To steel?
Yeah, a lot of steel, a lot of the sort of the mechanical parts. Those are the ones that we're familiar with.
Okay, so how does it work? Like, we have a Canadian entity and an American entity. How does like these tariffs and stuff like that affect us on both sides?
Well, because we have most of the business that we do is within a very small set of HS codes and country of origins.
Okay. Yeah.
So we largely know what to expect. Yeah. We learn a few lessons, But the most important thing is that you have an inventory record. The moment I say inventory records and ERPs, everybody gets,
I'm out.
everybody's out. But the most important thing is that when you learn a hard lesson, is that you record it.
Okay.
Yeah, so you write down and you say, hey, don't put this code, put this other code. And you think, well, isn't the code the code? And no, it's not.
Because the tariff codes.
Well, yeah, because the tariff codes can be hyper specific.
Okay.
Like there are some things that are called a bearing in one industry, but are not referred to a bearing overall.
So you're paying like a 25% tariff, or maybe a 5%. So the cost is significant.
Totally. Okay. And the bearings is the one that I did get burned on.
Okay.
So we had some bearings that were made in Germany, and they put them as, but they were actually like a bushing, which is like a thin plate of steel. And they put them in as a bearing, as in like a roller bearing that you would see in an electric motor, for instance, or your car. And they put those as bearings, and that produced this. That was this 10% tax on it was a $45,000 shipment.
Yeah.
And that's money that just.
And okay, so say you screw up your tariff code, like, can you get that back? Or they're like, it sucks to suck?
No, I think you can.
Okay.
You can, but it's a lot of paperwork.
For sure.
There's anytime you deal with those taxes and so forth, of course, people are like, oh, I didn't mean to put it through that one. I want to change it and stuff. You kind of just got to get it right the first time.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
We did have some paperwork that went to, I think it was Peru, South America for sure. And they accidentally duplicated, because it was two parcels. So they actually duplicated the value of the goods. And so now this person's like, I got hit with these. And that was more of like a duty as opposed to a tariff. So the duty was like, it didn't matter what they were selling. It was just the value of goods coming in.
Yeah.
Right. So you would see that in like a Caribbean country, where it doesn't matter what comes in, but they don't have the means to dispose of the stuff. So they can't just keep accumulating junk.
Gotcha.
So those ones, and they don't have the organization to handle all these tariffs and politics. So they just say it's just 40% on everything.
Like a duty, though.
That would be like a duty. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that'd be very similar to if you were to go across the border, you as a person.
Yeah.
They just give you a flat rate. They don't care as much about what you're doing.
Okay.
I think they do a little bit, but not as much. Yeah. And a lot of people get burned. A lot of people don't really understand it. Just try to understand. That's it. And you can look them up online. Okay. Look them up before you do it. But if you have a broker, just ask them. Or what I do is I'll send just a small part.
Okay.
See what happens. Send a sample.
Yeah.
See what happens, particularly if I'm doing a very large shipment. If I was doing I would say a large shipment, definitely over 100 grand. Send something if it's light. If you're sending something and it's a 300-pound motor and you're just sending one of them, that might not be economical. But if it's a small part, just send a UPS, send a courier. Yeah. And what you do is, if they get it wrong, they'll ask you.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll send you an email.
Like UPS will?
Yeah, the UPS broker. So like if you send a UPS over there, you're using UPS's broker.
Yeah.
Okay. So their broker will send you an email. And sometimes the government will ask a question from the broker, and then they'll forward that on to you as well.
Like what type of questions? Like, are you sure this is a steel bearing, or?
No, what they'll do is they'll send me, they'll say, prove it.
Okay.
You say this is made in USA.
Okay.
Prove it.
Gotcha.
Give me a letter from the supplier saying it. And they would probably follow up with that, depending on the company.
Yeah, for sure. And if you have prior notices or stuff like that, maybe?
What's that?
Like if you have prior, if they've looked into you before.
Oh, definitely. I mean, if you've been flagged before. Yeah. I think you always, whatever you're doing, you're always just making sure you don't end up on some list.
Yes.
Yeah, if you're getting blacklisted, your goose is cooked.
Yes, there you go.
Another thing that this is the first time that I've ever seen this, is I received a letter from the broker saying that they're going to ask for steel where it was poured.
Okay.
And I've never seen that before. So where the steel is poured. So now you can't just, so they have like a mill test, which is saying that this steel came from this mill and it passed this test and so forth. and you get provided that when you buy steel. And this time here though, they're asking, okay, where was the actual mill? Where was the where did they actually pour this steel for you? And that was a little crazy. So they must
And do you
know.
know stuff like that? Like they'll send you the paper, like you know that. If,
Well, typically you deal with a small amount of suppliers,
okay.
and we specify North American steel because it's part of our marketing efforts.
For sure.
So we don't want cheap Chinese steel because they're sort of our competitor for the attachments, and we know that it has labels on it saying which factory it came from.
Gotcha.
You know, if it came from Algoma and Sault Ste. Marie and so forth, it'll say that on there, but it could get kind of lost in the, next thing you know,
It goes to one person to one to the other.
Yeah,
It started
yeah.
up in the Sioux and now it's here.
Totally. I think that it's probably more just like it's of limited use,
Okay.
but it's gonna keep a lot of people on the straight and narrow because the moment you get on this blacklist, then you're done.
Yeah, the goose is cooking.
Yeah, if you're committing fraud against the government,
They'll find it.
yeah, that's up there with insurance fraud. You're probably done for anyways. Yeah.
Yeah, don't do it.
Was there anything
My only
else?
other question, which we kind of touched on before anyways, were like volume of sales changes, which I think you hit based on the fact that depending on the good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A lot of it is a depends question, but what it depends on isn't really that complicated. It's just like if you look at the list of the tariff codes and stuff like that, it'd be like hundreds of pages. It's quite a bit of stuff. In general, I say this as a North American manufacturer distributor. In general, if you stay North American, you can't go wrong.
Okay.
Okay, if you're buying North American goods made in North America, you're gonna be well protected, and the government will want to see you succeed as opposed to want to impede you.
Okay, I have another question. These tariffs, the steel, North American, like, is it NAFTA supposed to protect us? I know nothing about NAFTA, but doesn't that?
Well, NAFTA,
What?
so Trump, the last time they replaced NAFTA.
Wait, what? When?
Yeah, NAFTA, that was 5 years ago.
Oh, well.
Yeah, there's a new agreement.
Okay, so what's it different
They
now?
still sort of refer to it as a NAFTA agreement,
Okay.
though. They ask for like a NAFTA agreement paperwork, which
Okay.
is just something saying, hey, this came from Canada, this came from the U.S., and so forth.
Mexico?
Mexico, yes.
Is it not part of NAFTA?
It is. I just don't have as much experience with it
Gotcha.
because I don't import from Mexico.
Gotcha, okay.
A lot of the stuff that I get from Mexican goods already end up in the U.S. by the time I see them.
Okay.
Yeah. So they still sort of refer it as NAFTA goods. Yes, I think it is supposed to protect us a lot of that stuff. But these guys aren't going to put an agreement in where they're not going to sign an agreement where they can't change their mind.
For sure.
It's definitely going to be an at-will agreement if they have all the power.
Yeah.
And so the other thing was, this is the second time we've had a Trump presidency.
And how did it go the first time?
I don't really remember a whole lot of remarkable changes. There's one thing that changed, and that was corporate tax for a New York company. So he was in charge at the federal level. But it was the first time that the corporate tax for a New York company was less than that of an Ontario company. So people often think of the U.S. as having higher taxes. In fact, Ontario had higher corporate taxes than anybody in New York State. The other thing that I remember too was we had some importing of Chinese goods, as does anybody, and we were bringing them into Canada to avoid a lot of the Chinese, the tariffs that were on the U.S. side.
And that's something we could do because of the situation.
That's right. We have warehouses on both sides.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff ended up being sold in Canada, so we didn't really want to bring it to the U.S. only to sell in Canada. They're not going to give us when we export it, they're not going to give us our money back.
No.
Yeah. So I think we ended up actually doing like just sort of both sides, just to make sure it didn't have to cross that border and create a big mess. And the aluminum and steel was always on our mind as well. so it was just like, no, don't just throw a bunch of aluminum in the trucks or steel in there to export it to the U.S.
Because they had a tariff on aluminum.
Yeah, they had a tariff. So those are the only things I remember. Other than that, pretty unremarkable.
Great.
Yeah, I think it'll probably be, if I had to guess, probably the exact same. I think it'll be largely unremarkable. They'll put some tariffs on stuff. They will definitely do some posturing and all that. But if your mandate is to fight inflation, the last thing you want to be doing is charging 25% on imports when you import a lot of stuff. So that's my prediction.
All right.
I know it won't sell newspapers,
You never know.
but nobody's subscribing to this anyways. So,
Please subscribe.
all right, I think we're hoping to, once we get to 50, then we'll start doing this live in the morning.
Now we're going to sit and talk how we're going to get to 50.
All right, thank you.